I'll spend a huge amount of time talking about Tulsi Gabbard. I would say, I'm sure some people think we do. I would say in a different political environment, there's some things that are good about Tulsi Gabbard. I absolutely find it mystifying why people would orient around her campaign when Bernie's in the race. But look, I'll be honest. I find it mystifying why people would orient around any candidate besides Bernie. But the problem is, so there's a variety of problems, as an example, with Senator Warren relative to Bernie. And a lot of folks who support Warren over Bernie essentially are just overtly saying that they don't care about the U.S. footprint in the world. They don't care about military spending. They don't care about foreign policy.
Yeah, well, it's really complicated, all right?
It's, you know what?
They don't care about class struggle.
Well, they certainly don't care about class
struggle. Did you see
struggle.
Bernie's tweet? I'll bring it up after this, but he said if there's going to be a class war, it's about time the working class won it.
Oh, that got the RT for me.
Absolutely. The distinction with Tulsi Gabbard is that Tulsi Gabbard's whole selling point is that she is
a troop,
a warrior. Well, right, but that she's a warrior against U.S. militarism and foreign intervention. And you know, look, if this was 2008 or 2012 and you had a Democrat who said that they opposed foreign invasions and we're talking about the global environment and the military-industrial complex, which I actually misspoke on TMBS. I said that she does not talk about the military-industrial complex in the same way Bernie does, but that's something I'm glad to correct. She does use that phraseology, and she does speak on that. So absolutely credit where credit is due. But there's also been this extraordinary tension, which now as Bernie Sanders gets more and more clear and has a voting record on cutting defense spending. He's voted against every single Trump military budget increase. Warren's voted for all of them. I believe Tulsi's voted for one of them. And going back really to his record in the 80s as a mayor, calling out the U.S. dirty wars in Central America. Is Bernie's record perfect? Absolutely not. Is anybody's record perfect? Certainly not. But you don't have this other parallel lane of, at times, aggressive support for drone programs, ambiguities about torture. Tulsi, several weeks ago, put out a tweet that she was alarmed that John Lind was going to get released from prison and onto probation. I mean, this is like, if you're worried about John Walker Lind, and I'm sure 99% of you have no idea who he is in today's environment.
Haven't thought about that guy in a while.
To say the least, right? I was going to say, you probably didn't remember who that guy was, the American Taliban. So, you know, that's the type of obsession that, you know, find someone that loves you as much as Tulsi loves the war on terror in that regard.
And she's sending a message when she says stuff like that, too.
Absolutely. And she is, and there's parts of it, again, that I agree with. But she is trying to create what I would call as a left isolationist lane. And we're going to get to this clip in a second because it's very revealing. Actually, we'll do the clip first, but then I'm going to say a few more things about this Modi BJP stuff, because it actually really matters, because this should be a door into people having a much better grasp of Indian politics and the ideological currents that are running through it right now. But first, and I think that Jamie was right to say, what's her main selling point? She's a troop. But a lot of people who obsess over her are going to tell me that it's because she's an anti-imperialist. Now, again, if somebody says, hey, she was right about calling out regime change in Venezuela, yep, that's a totally valid point. There's a number of more narrow, valid cases you can make for her. Again, they don't still stand against Sanders. But I hear a lot of talk about her radicalism, which is not backed by policy, and now quite radically not backed by rhetoric, thanks to our buddy Virgil, Texas, from Chapo Trap House. What a bizarre world we live in. Asking Tulsi this question at a campaign event in Iowa.
Congresswoman, yes. Do you consider yourself an anti-imperialist?
I consider myself a pro-American. everything that I'm saying, everything that I'm doing comes from a place of love for our country and love for our people, and recognizing how important it is that we have unifying leadership in this country to bring people together so that we can bring about the kinds of changes we need to see. And as far as our foreign policy goes, to end our wasteful, failed policies of regime change so that we can focus on serving the interests of the American people, using the limited resources we have to do so.
So that's, to me, again, first of all, I'm just going to concede right off of the bat. She's not running for, a DSA chairmanship or what. Like, of course she's going to say she loves America, and every political candidate should say that. So don't try to distract with, defending the basic pablum. The pablum is fine. She should say it. That's great. What she did say, and she constantly frames this interventionist stuff as essentially a waste of money and resources versus a moral condemnation of the killing of civilians across the globe. Then when she talks about these vague bipartisan solutions, I'd ask you to look at her vote against Syrian refugees, which to me is a very fundamental vote, a very fundamental red line. And I'd ask you to go back to her rhetoric during the government shutdown when the government was getting shut down because of even more demands on this immigration war of the Trump administration. These are not areas where you can find sort of common ground. There's broader questions about civic spaces, about even how you make your arguments and appeal to a broader population, which are fine. I'm all ears for. But when it comes to ICE policies, when it comes to terrorizing Syrian refugees, no. Period. Full stop. And I want to get to India because, a lot of the things have already been litigated with Assad and, General Sisi is different. Her visit to General Sisi was not attacked in the mainstream media because the mainstream media whitewashes the Egyptian record, I would say, to a pretty significant extent as well. But there is clearly an interest in leaders in the Middle East who frame themselves as secular strongmen who can clean up Islamists. Now, that coupled with the refugee vote, that's something to consider and be serious about. Now, in India, the answer that Tulsi has put forward and others have put forward, that talking about her political relationship to the RSS and the BJP to the extent that exists is a form of Hindu phobia, and that her interest in South Asian affairs should not be presented in that way. And so, first of all, I just want to say that, I'm a veteran of this stuff because I've been accused of being a self-hating Jew, of harping on people's Jewish identity, because I am absolutely willing to call out people who may be of Jewish descent who back the Israeli apartheid.
Very disloyal.
Very disloyal. So, so the kind of like petty base identity politics is not something to come at me with, frankly, period. I'm not here for it. Now, when she went to India, she absolutely has also met with members of the Congress Party. And incidentally, the Congress Party, which has to some extent preserved a Nehru's vision of a certain pluralism, is not a party that I support or something to write home about in terms of their neoliberalism, corruption, and even horrific rights abuses under Indira Gandhi in the state of emergency in particular. But what you have right now is you have an Indian leadership led by Narendra Modi, who going back to 2002 is already credibly implicated in some of the greatest atrocities on earth. And I see a lot of people talking about the 2002 Gujarat riots. When Narendra Modi was head of Gujarat, there was a killing spree of Muslims that lasted a couple of days. I think the estimates of over 2,000 people murdered in this span. And look, I apologize, and I mean this as an authentic trigger warning. I'm just going to say, lighting people on fire, cutting women's stomachs open with babies, cutting pregnant women's stomachs open. I mean, we're talking truly savage, horrific atrocities. Now, in 2012, there was an Indian-appointed Supreme Court. It wasn't a Supreme Court, but I believe it was a commission appointed by the Supreme Court that cleared Modi of all wrongdoing, and that has been upheld. Now, there have been over 60 inquiries about this by national and international bodies, including a National Human Rights Commission of India report. that concluded that violence was supported by state officials in Gujarat. The U.S.'s State Department on Internal Religious Freedom report concluded that the attacks, and I'm quoting now, that the attacks had been premeditated and that officials were complicit, and that there was evidence of police not acting during the assault of Muslims. The U.S. State Department also cited how Gujarat's high school textbooks described Hitler's, quote, charismatic personality and achievements of Nazism. If you go back to the founding of this group, the RSS, which is a kind of far-right Hindu nationalist paramilitary group, and it's somewhat akin to maybe, it's a very imperfect analogy, but if you thought of the KKK as the paramilitary and the Southern Democratic Party was the political arm, the BJP is a political project subsumed in a larger RSS project. And the RSS goes back to the 20s and the 30s, and their leaders, in addition to being ardent and correct fighters for Indian independence, were also, in some cases, very fascinated by Hitlerian models and Nazis. So people can come at me and say, oh, the Indian Supreme, a commission report appointed by the Indian Supreme Court cleared the Prime Minister of India. Okay, I understand that. But I'm thinking that all of us with some type of left inclination, we probably generally have a deep skepticism of state and legal procedures that clear people of wrongdoing when there's overwhelming evidence to the contrary, including ones from independent bodies and including even our own State Department. And just to be really clear, this is the State Department under the Bush administration when the Bush administration was making very, very tight moves with India for a variety of reasons, including to counterbalance China. So there was zero interest in sort of playing interference for Muslim rights in India. Like let's be obvious. And part of the reason that issue actually grew in Congress was that a lot of Christians were killed as well. This is in 2014. Where, and again, people also say this, yes, Barack Obama was very tight with Narendra Modi. Now, I co-wrote a piece before Narendra Modi was elected prime minister saying Obama should, at the very least, keep some distance because of Gujarat and the ideology of BJP. But I also recognize the difference between a congressperson eagerly sort of seeking out a relationship with the head of state versus a bilateral head of state relationship. This is from a piece in the New Indian Express in December 22nd, 2014. Tulsi Gabbard said that Obama and Modi may have buried the hatchet. She said that Modi was, quote, a man on a mission. And I'm quoting from the piece. Modi was denied an American visa for many years after the Godhra incident, in which claimed the lives of thousands in Gujarat. Now it's back to Tulsi. I think it's clear from both Modi's perspective as well as Obama's perspective that the past has been buried and both are looking towards the future. There's been a lot of misinformation surrounding that event in 2002. Obama's visiting India on its Republic Day is further evidence that that the past is the past and both leaders want to collaborate in a way that benefits both of them. And then it goes on to talk about her role. This is some B-roll of Gabbard's meeting with Modi. There was a personal message from Modi to Gabbard's wedding. Now, again, people who want to say that this is a function of Hindu phobia are making precisely an indistinguishable, a carbon copy argument of people who say criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic or criticizing Pakistan is anti-Muslim. The reality is we should be criticizing and fighting against rightward forces in all of these countries. And there is a reason, by the way, that you can actually see a very tight relationship between Netanyahu and Modi. There is a incredibly diverse Hindu tradition. There's an amazing book by Amartya Sen called The Argumentative Indian. I'd recommend people read it. You can criticize BJP and RSS and Hindutva within Hindu sources. That's not the issue at all. And I really would like people to not only be a little bit honest about Gabbard in this regard, but actually use it as an opportunity, as I say, to try to understand the politics and the dynamics of one of the most important countries on earth and who's actually running it right now, and the types of escalation that we're seeing with regards to Kashmir. That would have been a lot for Virgil to pack into a question, but I think you take my point.